everybody, to A Night at the Movies, a podcast with Paul Miller and Leslie Heimbaugh. Leslie, thank you so much for coming back after our first episode.
Oh, this was a pleasure. I'm so excited.
Well, and so one of the things that we're going to do is each month we're going to have a different film topic. So we started off our maiden voyage, our first podcast, by talking about how we got into cinema. Well, today what we are going to talk about is a bit more about our favorite films that we had. So what I'd asked Leslie to do is to come up with sort of a list of her favorite films. And just for the sake of the podcast, we're going to stick to our top 5. Now, something that and a hill that I will die on, Leslie, is that I find it impossible to compare drama and comedy films. So I have actually separated them into two different ranking lists. So I have drama and comedy in two different lists, and if you don't, that's fine, and we can sort of go with that and maybe just kind of go by ear. But that's always been a thing that I've said, like, I can't say that a comedy is my favorite movie because, like, I have my favorite comedies and I have my favorite dramas, but it's like apples and oranges.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about films, to me, that is always a real important piece of it, is to kind of compare them with other similar type of pictures.
This is limiting to 5 is like impossible. It's like pulling my fingernails out right now, but it is really a tough job because I love so many things about so many movies. I
really just kind of picked off the top of my head for some of these, and I'm sure that if I would have thought about this for a longer period of time, that I might have had some different films in here, but at the same time, I wanted it that way because I was afraid that if I thought about it for too long, then I was going to start second-guessing myself.
Yeah.
So what I wanted was sort of a quick reaction to it. Interestingly enough, and I don't know if you ever had a chance to listen to this, I was on a podcast where we ranked the Tarantino films, and that is something that I really enjoyed doing, and then when I listened back to it, I started second-guessing myself again, and I didn't want that. So, I didn't want to do that. So I really kind of just came up with these sort of on the top of my head. So how do you want to do this, Leslie? Is there one you want to start with over the other?
Yeah, let's start with dramas.
Okay. So, all right. For me, if I start at number 5, I am going to go with The Matrix. Why this was interesting to me is obviously I was a big fan of Terminator, and when I was a kid, Terminator 2, again, we talked about this last time. That's another one of the honorable mention memories when I actually saw Terminator 2 in the theater with Arnold, and it's sort of cheesy now when you look back at it, but it was one of those really interesting films that, again, it wasn't just the violence, it was what the film was talking about, and really what it is was, we have to be very careful what we do with technology, and of course there have been a lot of films that have been like this, but Matrix was so ahead of the game in terms of visual effects, so ahead of the game on a story about what might happen if the machines take over. I also remember one of the interesting things that they did was they had Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions. They filmed them at the same time. They came out within a year of one another. And I actually saw these at not the IMAX theater. In Pittsburgh, there was an OmniMax. Have you ever heard of this?
No, I haven't.
So it's like a planetarium.
Oh, wow.
When you go and you kind of sit laying back, like you're not looking straight at the screen, and I hope I'm doing justice trying to describe this in an audio form, but it's like you're laying back and you're sort of at not a 90-degree angle, maybe more like a 60-degree angle, and the screen is just massive. And so you literally, when there are two people talking and they're cutting back and forth to close-ups, you're literally having to turn your head to just watch that. Like, it was an unbelievable experience. And so I got to see Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions in there, and I think that's part of the reason too. But I also think they hold up. And by the way, a new one's coming out.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've never seen The Matrix. But I have to just take 1 second and tell you about my husband and the Terminator, because he loves those movies. And when we were first married, maybe a couple of years, but I was wallpapering the hallway in my new house, and he was watching Terminator. I think it was probably just the first one. but he gets so into movies that he can barely control his behavior while he's watching. I came around the corner to get something out of the kitchen, and he was standing on a chair watching the movie. He was so keyed up that he's standing on a chair. He's 6'2", watching a movie, standing up like that. I almost died. He's just hilarious.
But yeah, definitely a one. I was kind of going back and forth between some, and I will say that like Tenet and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I think maybe at some point might crack my top 5.
Yeah.
I still think they're too new for me, that I don't know that I've given them enough. I've really only seen both of them twice.
Yeah.
So I think I need to watch them a couple more times to just ensure that they're quality top 5. But I am going to go with The Matrix at number 5 for me. How about you?
My number 5 is probably I'm gonna have regrets. I can already tell you, but I love period movies, like historical movies. So I'm probably going to say Pride and Prejudice is it's the version with Keira Knightley, and I go berserk over that. Mr. Darcy wins me over every single time I watch it, and I've probably seen that one 10 times.
Now, what is it about a period film like that intrigues you?
I think the way life was, and it's fascinating to me that there were so many things about life that were so much simpler then, and yet there were so many things about life that were so much more complicated. Just getting dressed. The fact that wealthy people had someone to dress them because there were so many parts to your outfit, that you needed help getting into it. And, I don't know, just the fact that so many of the humanities were so valued back then, and that, everybody needed to learn how to play the piano. If you were a person worth anything, you knew something about art and literature, and, it just seems like such a more, I don't know, just a special time in our history, just that those things are really important.
I think what's interesting for me is, and this sort of goes back to Chris Nolan. I mean, I'm such a huge fan, but I still haven't seen Dunkirk yet. There are certain genres of films that, gosh, I just can't bring myself to really watch. War movies is one of them. And honestly, a lot of those period type pieces as well, it's very, very tough for me to, again, with being so busy, there's a very, very particular type of movie that I enjoy, and gosh, maybe I need to expand my horizons a bit.
It's super relaxing. It's super relaxing, but it's not boring at all for me. I mean, I don't care if there's no action at all, but there's a lot of human drama, and I go totally for that, for feelings and how people are connected, and all this, the proper way to ask someone to marry you and all that stuff. It just fascinates me that that's how people used to do things.
So Pride and Prejudice for you at number 5, huh?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go to my number 4 drama, and this is sort of a throwback to our first podcast. I'm going to go with Fight Club at number 4. For me, I think a lot of it has to do, number one, the movie's great. Historically, always gets good reviews. I do think part of it was my age, while I did have some experience with film, never really at an analyzation level. And when I think back, I've always been a fan of Brad Pitt. Mm-hmm. And, I've always enjoyed, almost any movie that he's in, I'll enjoy, which one of the other reasons I like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood so much, because he is such a great character and actually won the Academy Award for his portrayal in that film. But Fight Club is just one of the most memorable films to me. I can still throw it on to this day and still just absolutely love it. And it's a film that I will always consider as one of my favorites.
Yeah, that is a good one. I'll say my next one, I'm kind of blurting them out because my list is just so detailed.
Vast.
And don't laugh, but Braveheart. I've seen that movie 100 times. And
I saw it at the theater.
I
bet I have my ticket stub for that stuff.
I never get sick of it.
Like I said, I do, and I'm actually a fan of Mel Gibson too. And honestly, some of the films that, again, so many that we're leaving out, I'm a die-hard Lethal Weapon fan.
Yeah.
Die-hard Lethal Weapon fan. So I've always been a fan of Mel Gibson, certainly some of his earlier work. I don't really know that he's done a whole lot in the last decade or so. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely saw that. Again, for me, and the reason I want to do this is I kind of want to just get a sense of, what are the types of movies that you like, and what are the types of movies that I like, and I think that this is really cool.
Yeah.
So my next one, this one was challenging because I wanted to make sure that I represented Christopher Nolan up here. I love The Prestige. I don't know if you've ever seen The Prestige. Yeah. That was a movie that I left and I was like, oh, the ending.
Me too.
Like, wow, that is wild.
Too.
But I can't put The Prestige up there.
No, I can't either, but I did love it.
Dark Knight, I really was very, very close to writing that down here, but again, just didn't crack my top 5. Probably would crack my top 10. But my Christopher Nolan movie that I am going to put up here is Memento.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Again, so you're talking about the idea in the last episode, Leslie, about non-linear editing. You're talking about Tarantino. This movie was so unbelievably constructed that I saw it the first time, and I didn't even know who Chris Nolan was. Really, no one did.
No.
And, I mean, they made that movie for like $5 million.
Right.
But I did know Guy Pearce, and I'm like, okay, this is an interesting movie. And actually, what's interesting is Carrie Ann Moss was in it. I mean, there was a lot of sort of character actors, but you at least knew who they were.
Yeah.
But the way that movie was put together, oh my gosh, it was really sort of mind-boggling. So I'm going at number 3 with Memento.
All right. And then I'll come back. See, a lot of mine are pretty recent, but it's just because they have had such profound effects on me. But I would say Moonlight is my next one.
I'm so sad that I've never seen that.
It'll change your life in that, just like I said earlier, you really realize how strongly everyone is entitled to love who they love. Even, nobody gets to decide that for you.
And that one Best Picture, didn't it?
Yes. And best supporting actor, too. Which
bothers me because I got to be honest with you, I always make it a point to watch the Best Picture film each year. I'll give you a perfect example. My wife, really into romantic comedies, loves musicals. I'm like, okay, I want to take her to see La La Land.
Yes.
I don't want to say she didn't like it. She liked it. I loved it. Yes. And I never thought in a million years I would like this movie. I really just wanted to have a nice date night with her. I knew I figured she'd enjoy it. Yeah. And again, she did. That opening scene in that movie, I mean, that's got to be one of the most memorable scenes in any film ever. When they're dancing on the highway, like such a great movie. And honestly, like a tearjerker.
Yeah.
I mean, it was honestly, I actually bought it for her, but really for me on DVD. So.
It's really honestly just outside my top 5 for sure, because I don't like musicals. I hate them.
I'm not a fan.
There's
myself.
only like 3 musicals I love, but just really quickly, even though the car scene was spectacular, I didn't want it to be that kind of musical, and I was scared that I was sitting down to that.
Right.
And I was
it definitely isn't.
Crap. I didn't want. This is not what I wanted to see, but it won me over immediately after that.
That was another one that I left the movie theater and I really was taken aback by. But my point was, I am really surprised here, Leslie, that I never saw Moonlight, because I really always make it a point to see the Best Picture. So, I mean, I'm going to leave here today and have like 3 or 4 movies I got to watch before we do this again.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go, and these have been my top 2 for probably the last 20 years. I'm going to go Pulp Fiction number 2.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about it a little bit on the last episode. It's what got me into film.
Yeah.
Tarantino, I'm just such a huge Tarantino fan. I will say that I'm not a fan of Inglourious Bastards, which I tell people that, and they're like, what are you talking about?
We just watched it again last night, a little bit of it.
Again, it's that war. For whatever reason, I don't know, maybe it was because my grandfather served in Korea, and it's just, I don't really know how to describe it. It's just not something that interests me. And I'm sure that there are tons of, even Apocalypse Now we had to watch in my film class in grad school when I went to SHIP. And I respected the movie, but there's just so much pain in war movies. And I don't go into film, and it's almost sort of the same reason I'm not a fan of horror movies. At least with horror movies, I know that this didn't actually happen in most cases.
Yeah.
In war movies, gosh, even if it didn't happen exactly that way, you knew other stuff like that actually did happen. So, that was one that I was, and even The Hateful Eight, I came around on.
Yeah.
But I'm not like over the moon about it.
That's my least favorite Tarantino, actually.
But Pulp Fiction, everything about it really changed. Honestly, to me, it changed the direction of cinema over the last 25 years.
Absolutely. So you were just at number 2?
2.
Yeah. My number 2 is similar to my number 3, and it's Call Me by Your Name. It's a totally different story, but about the same idea. So I sobbed at the end of it. I had to sit in the theater with my hands over my face for 20 minutes after.
I got to be honest, I've never even heard of this.
It's a movie. It's just an absolutely stunningly beautiful.
Who was in it?
Timothée Chalamet. That was his first big role that I know of, and Armie Hammer.
Okay.
And
when did it come out?
Probably 2 years ago. It was definitely in the Oscar race, and I'm pretty sure it won for something.
Wow.
But it's a total experience. But again, it's not a fast mover. It's it's slow, and it's a lot of deep feelings.
Well, gosh, I mean, listen, I respect your movie opinion.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to have to check. I mean, obviously, I can't watch all these,
right?
But I mean, at least in the short term, I promise you, I'm going to watch these so we can come back a little bit more. But that's very interesting, and that's one that I must have just missed. And I got to be honest, that's the one thing about me. I know certain directors, certain actors, I know that like if they're coming out with something, I'm going to try to see it. But honestly, outside of that, if it's not on my radar, like I don't make any type of effort to go see it at the theater. And honestly, I'd say, Leslie, ever since I've been here and working a lot at the college, I would say I probably only get to maybe a movie every other month. I mean, I'm lucky if I go to 6 a year.
Yeah.
And so at home, we typically, I don't just sit around and watch movies by myself. So I typically try to find something that my wife and I can both enjoy, which there aren't very many. Let's just put it that way. But that's definitely one I'll definitely check out. All right, number 1 will be, I would have to say, I would have to be just unbelievably blown away for this never to not be my number 1 movie, and it's Reservoir Dogs. I love, when I saw Reservoir Dogs, of course, after I saw Pulp Fiction, I was twice as blown away because it's a faster film. It is so full of, I love the crime movies. I'm like another one I was really thinking about up here is Get Shorty. Shorty is one of my favorite movies. So I love Elmore Leonard, the author that wrote Get Shorty and some of the other books. And I love that, and that's why I like Lethal Weapon.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to say I like buddy cop movies, but Reservoir Dogs is along those heist kind of crime films, and the dialogue in that movie, it was, again, it's a quick hitter. It's like a quick 95 minutes. The soundtrack is great. It's just classic Tarantino, and it's so funny how Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction are so similar but yet so different. And again, like when I think about the movies that I want to sit down and watch, I think that these are really the 5: Matrix, Fight Club, Memento, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs. I think I'm good with that.
My number 1 is going to be Pulp Fiction. I can't. There's like 5 movies that I put on that same tier that aren't. Fargo is just right beside.
Love
it.
Fargo too. Huge Coen Brothers fan.
Those kind of things changed my life. It's so hard to pick just. But Pulp Fiction has to be it.
And I'm going to reserve comment on that, particularly until we have Tarantino podcast, but just such a great movie from top to bottom.
Gosh, yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on to comedy. So we're going to talk, this was a little tougher for me. There's a couple that I really, really, really like, and then there's a couple that I'll put on and watch and laugh, but that I don't have as much respect and admiration for. That's what I'm going for here, is sort of funny, but also sort of serious enough that it's a respectful movie and not just like a totally slapstick movie. Not to not to, say anything negative about slapstick. I mean, Airplane, for example. I know that you were, here for the film series,
Yes.
and again, that's a great movie on sort of a different level for me. So I'm going to start. I suppose that you would consider this movie a comedy. Ghostbusters.
Yes.
I'm in a platonic way, love Bill Murray.
Me too.
I mean, he is. I have a book, if you want to borrow it, you're welcome to, called The Tao of Bill Murray. I don't know if
my gosh.
It's all about people because he's an unbelievably eccentric fellow. Yeah. People who've run into him and things that he did that the author kind of went around and talked to people who knew Bill Murray or had experiences with Bill Murray, and that's all it is. Different experiences of things that Bill Murray did sort of just out in public or random, and it's really, really funny. But Ghostbusters, I just love. And of course, Ghostbusters 2, I'll sort of lump in there. The newer Ghostbusters movie I actually really liked, even though it got really bad
with
ratings.
With all women.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it.
Yeah, I thought it was fun.
I'll also say Ghostbusters Afterlife is supposed to be coming out this summer too, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah.
But love, gosh, I can watch Ghostbusters. And actually, we last summer went to see it at an outdoor drive-in, and then 2 years ago, it was for one of the anniversaries, they played it in a theater, so we all went to that too. So I've seen it. I never initially saw it in a theater, but I have seen it in the theater, and the kids like it too. So
yeah, that's fun. This is also tough for me, but I can really relate to your statement about how it has to have some substance to it, and yet I shockingly love. Well, I'll say it. Something About Mary. Because it doesn't really have a ton of substance, but I never get sick of it, and it makes me howl every time I see it.
So that's the Farrelly brothers,
yes,
who also did Kingpin,
which another favorite of mine.
I mean, that's a movie I can seriously watch over and over. And I was actually thinking about, so I'm a bowler too, and we'll kind of get to that on one of my future movies. So I've bowled for 30 years, actually more than that. I started when I was 8. And so I do appreciate them, and I do think they have a very special type of humor.
Yes.
For me, Kingpin would edge out Something About Mary. And gosh, it was back and forth between Kingpin and Ghostbusters right there. But I absolutely do respect them. They really haven't done a whole lot lately, have they?
No, they haven't. But both those are on my list of hilarious movies.
So number 4 for me is Hangover. I think that group of people, and I think Zach Galifianakis is just hysterical, certainly in this movie, but in general. I thought that the movie was extremely well done. You want to talk about a non-stop film. There are no slow spots in that movie. From the second that even the beginning, when they're, in the first act, when they are, he's asking for people for money for the field trip, and then he ends up taking all the students' money to Vegas with them. I mean, it's just nonstop hilarity throughout the film. And I would say it's maybe a little amateur, but I do think that there was enough there for me to absolutely consider that one of my top 5.
Oh, the payoff at the end when you see what actually happened, that brought it all home for me. Plus the song Doug, Doug, Dougie, Doug, Doug. We sing that all the time at home. I think I'm going to put my next one at Dinner for Schmucks. This is a Paul Rudd and Steve Carell. He makes it into a couple of my favorites, but it's just so ridiculous that Steve Carell is he's a taxidermy expert on mice. The stuff he does with them. I just love that movie. I just love it.
Gosh, I've never seen that one either. You're just giving me a whole list of stuff I got to go watch, Leslie. All right, number 3 for me. Old School. Mm-hmm. I love Will Ferrell.
Me too.
And I knew Will Ferrell had to get into this, even though he's not even billed as one of the top characters. Obviously, he is Frank the Tank. I mean, it's an iconic character. Yeah. Old School I found to be really interesting because I've always thought that idea was interesting in terms of, a bunch of older guys, gravitating into a college town and becoming sort of local legends. But I really do think that there is some interesting takeaways from the movie, and does have some depth, even though on the surface it's sort of a raunchy R-rated comedy.
Sure.
I do think there was some redeeming characteristics there in terms of motivation. And now, there are some hazing things in there, which, that's obviously been a major issue at the college level. But I would also say that mentorship, I think there were some themes of that in there. I thought that was really cool. So I'm going to go old school number 3.
Well, and that's something we could talk about in the future a little bit too, is the idea that can you look at a movie in the time that it was released and tolerate things that we wouldn't tolerate anymore? Airplane's classic for that. There's some really, really bad things in that. And yet at the time, it was totally acceptable, and we laughed our heads off at it.
It's interesting that you say that, because I just read an article the other day, and it was all about Tarantino's use of colorful language, racially motivated.
Yeah.
And wondering if the author wasn't saying one way or the other whether he felt that it should or shouldn't. He's concerned that as we continue to progress as a country, that this might be one of the casualties Tarantino's films in terms of the legacy he has because of the language and certain words that he uses in his films. And I thought that was a very interesting take.
Yeah. Well, I've always, and maybe this is a controversial position, but I've always looked at if someone like Sam Jackson says something, and that would be the way he would talk in his normal life, which I firmly believe. I think a lot of characters he's played are probably an extension of how he is.
Ordell Roby's probably one of the most notable.
Exactly. And so to me, that makes it acceptable, because that's him,
Number 3, Leslie.
Number 3, I'm going to go way back and get The Jerk. Steve Martin. That was the first R-rated movie I ever was allowed. I wasn't allowed to go, but I went on a date to it and had to come home and tell my dad I went to an R-rated movie with my date. But I would have done it 100 times to see that movie.
That is one that I've seen, dozens of times. If it's on TV, I'll catch it. Steve Martin, I like. Definitely love that movie, though. I think for me, I'm a little... because that came out in the late 70s, right? Yeah. So, again, it was, even for me when I started watching movies, it would have been 10, 15 years old at that point.
Yeah.
But I do think, in terms of comedies from the 70s, I think that's got to be up there with some of the best. So, all right. For me, I am going to go number 2, Groundhog Day.
Yeah, that's a great one.
So, here's what's interesting about Groundhog Day. Number 1, I was born on Groundhog Day.
Yes.
So my birthday is February 2nd. So, this movie has always been a movie that just because of my birthday, and it's an annual tradition to me to watch this movie. I've watched it every year on my birthday or around my birthday for 20 years. A couple of years ago, we go down to the Midtown Cinema. First of all, when we're able, but we go down a couple times. Oh, and have you seen the renovations?
No.
So Zero D Brewery, which used to be sort of around the corner, that's like their main production facility, and now they have moved their tap room into the theater.
Wow!
So they have food, they have a bar there, some high top tables, so you can go in and kind of have like a meal before you go into the theater. I'm so
excited.
Yes, so they've done. I haven't been there, but I've seen pictures. It's going to be like a whole different place.
Wow!
But a couple years ago, they had a brunch. Like a small brunch buffet. They had somebody came in and catered it for Groundhog Day, and they had it was a Sunday. They had like a morning showing, and it was so much fun. And we ended up, we went for my birthday, went with a couple friends, and then we ended up meeting these people who go to Punxsutawney for the celebrations, and I've never been. So a couple years ago, with one of the companies that I work for, we've actually befriended the people who run the Groundhog Day. They've invited us, our company, up to, vend at their events, and I've gotten to meet Phil many times.
Oh my gosh! And
we've gotten to hang out with them. The guys, every single one of those guys that's on stage, I know them. Katie Donald it's a nonprofit organization. She's the executive director. We're like BFFs.
Yeah.
I still never gotten to go on Groundhog Day because, for a variety of reasons, it's usually I can't get off of work, or it's a whole procedure because you really realistically have to be there at 3 a.m. And, it's a 3.5-hour drive up there.
Yes.
So all of that being said, I've noticed this before. And actually, I believe it was last year, once I started studying film a bit more, that I really looked into Groundhog Day. And I think when we think of Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, we really think of, the scenes of the groundhog driving the truck down the train tracks and Ned Ryerson and punching him in the face. And when we think back to Groundhog Day, you think of funny moments. But Leslie, I almost wouldn't consider this movie a comedy. This has, you want to talk about philosophy here.
Yes.
There is some just unbelievable stuff you can read online about this movie, about the amount of time, about the religious comparisons, him being sort of stuck in purgatory.
Yes.
How much time, there are people who have done dissertations about how much time he spent in that Groundhog Day based on some scientific, research. But there is such a deeper meaning to that movie than what is on the surface. If you see it one time and you take the funny moments away, it is great. But I like it because of the substance. Obviously, there's some unbelievably funny moments.
Yes.
But there's also some tremendous substance to this film, and it's got to be definitely up there for me.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm having such a hard time here, but I'm going to say Bridesmaids is my next one.
Definitely one I've seen. I saw that at the theater too.
It's raunchy, and yet it's so smart. And so Kristen Wiig is one of my favorites.
She just came out with a new movie, and I can't remember what it's called.
I know what it is too.
We watched it.
Was it good?
Yes, it was very good.
Okay, I'm going to I don't know I didn't know if I wanted to spring for $20 to watch it, but I think I will.
I think it's on Netflix.
Oh, is it?
It was on a streaming service. We didn't pay for it.
Oh,
it's probably one you haven't. Gosh, I'm so sorry. I can't remember the name.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Bridesmaids. Yeah, I definitely saw. That's one of Jackie's favorites, and I enjoy it too.
But that's one men can like too.
Absolutely. All right, last one for me. It's 100% The Big Lebowski. I'm such a big Coen Brothers fan. Absolutely love this film. Certainly as a bowler, that's kind of what drew me to it in the first place. But John Goodman's character is gotta be one of the top 5 characters in the history of film.
Yes.
How good Walter Sobchak is. And it's just, the movie is funny and ridiculous and serious and just all at the same time, really that, and I talked about this in my presentation, that it's sort of a modern day film noir.
Yeah.
But somehow just manages to have some of the funniest laugh out loud scenes ever. And again, almost a situation where it's more like a black comedy.
Yes.
It's sort of, I wouldn't necessarily put it as a comedy, but it's so funny.
Yes.
How do you not classify it as a comedy?
Oh, I'm already experiencing so much regret for my picks, but I'm going to have to say my number one is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Okay. Well, obviously, so I think it's interesting that we both have Coen Brothers films at the top of our list. I love Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I now haven't seen it in a little while.
Oh my God.
But I'm a big Clooney fan, and this is actually something I wanted to bring up too. In my top 5 dramas, I really wanted to get even Ocean's 11, but more of sort of the whole series. I love those films, those caper films. Again, you have you want to talk about an all-star cast. That's got to be the best cast ever assembled.
Put together, yeah.
But yeah, Well, Brother, Where Art Thou? George Clooney's always been one of my favorite actors too. So of course I love when I get to see him, and of course such a big fan of the Coens and what they've done and their style as auteurs. So maybe we can even throw in a Coen film.
Yeah.
I'm already taking us out a year on ideas of what we're going to do, but. So for Leslie, we've got Something About Mary, Dinner for Schmucks, The Jerk, Bridesmaids, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And for me, in terms of comedies, we have Ghostbusters, Hangover, Old School, Groundhog Day, and Big Lebowski. On the drama side, we have for Leslie, Pride and Prejudice, Braveheart, Moonlight, Call Me By Your Name, and Pulp Fiction. And for me, we have The Matrix, Fight Club, Memento, Pulp Fiction, and Reservoir Dogs. So I think that was a pretty quick and down and dirty discussion. Again, these were sort of just, we didn't. It's so difficult to do this. When you think about film fans like we, I think that when you think about trying to assemble all these films and putting them there for different reasons, I think is also interesting. And again, I'm sure you're going to think about this, and maybe a year from now we come back and revisit this
Yes.
and see if some of these other films sort of cracked our top 5.
That's right.
But I mean, there's a ton of films out there that I know that I didn't.
Yeah.
Spike Lee, like Do the Right Thing.
Yes.
By Spike Lee, 25th Hour, if you've ever seen that, a really
Yes.
good one.
Yeah.
I talked about the Ocean's films. Obviously, Star Wars, I didn't even
Yeah.
get to put in there. So
Yeah.
there are so many movies out there that we just couldn't. There's only 5. There's
Yeah.
only room. It's
Yeah.
almost like Mount Rushmore, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's only a very finite
Yeah.
area. So. But Leslie, I appreciate you taking the time
Oh,
to
it's fun.
whittle it down to a top 5, and I think that this is a great way that we can start our show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Leslie, that's going to do it for our second episode of A Night at the Movies. So, of course, again, I want to thank you for being here, and it's always a pleasure. I look forward to doing this again.
I do too. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, so for A Night at the Movies, this is Paul Miller for Leslie Heimbaugh. We'll see you again next month.